Appreciate everyone joining on the West Coast today in Carlsbad. Actually, at my residence and not at the office. I've got a event that I'm going to right after this, NFL related. So I'm scrambling on schedule, but we've got some good stuff to help everybody get their young athlete prepped and ready for the season. My good friend Peter Cummings is going to join me, and I jokingly say that I'm not a doctor, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. But we've got a variety of brilliant physicians part of our team on our medical advisory board. Dr. Peter Cummings, I'll let him introduce himself. I know we've got a couple others watching, but Tal David was a head physician on the Chargers. Michael McDermott runs neurology down at Baptist Health. Peter, you're aware of, and gosh, we have trauma doctors, chief of staff here at Scripps La Jolla, and others that have helped us in terms of guiding the company, our technology, working with our engineering staff, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. I'll get started in just another minute because I still see some people are adding. It's interesting when you do these because with this technology, I don't see anybody else other than just me. So, Peter, I don't know if you want to flip your camera on so I'm not alone, but
Yeah, now I can just see me too, so I don't know.
good.
But that's
Now I don't feel
great.
so bad. There's another voice.
Yeah, yeah. And a bunch of names in black squares.
Uh, Everybody knows who I am, obviously, CEO Light Helmets. My I'll start with this. Usually I end with it. This is a helmet that my son wore. Dan Orslowski from ESPN, his sons wear these helmets. Tony Romo. Uh, we'll get into a little bit more about some of the athletes that are involved. And, we'll talk a little bit about light products in the helmet space, but this isn't designed to be a quote unquote like a sales presentation. It's really designed to help parents or parents that have young athletes since their first time showing up for football. We're not just going to talk about head health and safety, but Peter, could you give a little bit of background just so everybody knows, where this info's coming from?
Sure. I'll give you the abbreviated version. I started out. I'm kind of in a u unique position where I'm a physician who specializes in brain trauma. I'm also the father of a football player, and I coached football for a number of years. And that part of the journey was really a journey of discovery, where I didn't want my son to play football. I'd read a lot of the media and didn't want him anywhere near it. And then one day he discovered the sport, and I remember the day. Anyone who's ever heard me speak on this story's getting old, but I remember he busted in the front door and he says, "Dad, have you ever heard of this thing called football?" And my stomach just sank, and I thought, "Oh boy." And I thought it was going to be a fad. I wasn't going to try to, make it a taboo subject. And I loved football growing up; it was a huge part of my youth and my early adulthood. So, um, I took a look at the sport. I said, so I had so many people in my life say no to me and put so many barriers in front of me that I always said I wouldn't be that kind of parent. So I decided I should take a look. First thing I did is I looked at the research, and felt like a lot of the things we read in the media about concussions and CTE and these other things are probably over exaggerated from where they are in science. The other thing I did is I went to the football leagues. I went to Pop Warner. I went to USA Football. I said, "What are you guys doing to improve the game, even if there is a slight possibility that this thing may be a problem?" And I was amazed at what they were doing. So I took all the coaching certifications, and I became a coach. Started coaching him, and sort of made that process of me spending time with my son and as a father-son coach as a young boy when he started playing, into some activism to make sure that everybody had the same experience and advantages that he had in terms of access to quality coaching, good safety. That led to a whole career actually, where I ended up jumping ahead in a number of years, becoming the medical director at TB12 Sports, which was Tom Brady's health and wellness company. And then we split that TB12 Sports into two separate companies because they were both becoming very successful, and understood that one of them had to eat the other, or separate off into two businesses. So we separated into two businesses. TB12 remained products, which is protein powders and all the things that they do. And Alex Guerrero and I took over all of the services, which is, kind of what you think of TB12 with the pliability and the words you may have heard with that. Um, so I am the owner of that, the co-founder with Alex, and we rebranded it to something called TBRX, which is for Total Body Recovery. And I picked that name because people always ask me, what is TB12? Is it a diet? Is it a exercise? Is it a gym? And it's a total body recovery. And so we chose that name, TBRX, for that. That's led me to, over the last 8 years or so, to be able to work with a lot of great athletes at all levels, from youth to high school to professional, and be able to really make a positive impact in a lot of different ways. And that's how you and I met, Nick, is through the California Youth Football Alliance, as we were trying to find really new and exciting things to bring to football, to show that to kind of, I think football and football coaches, football families have done so much to promote safety in this sport, that I think it's we should be very proud of what we've done as a football family, and meeting people like you and being able to go out there and say, hey, look what we have, look what we can do, has been a really great experience. So that's the abbreviated version, if you believe it.
Thanks for that, Peter, and I appreciate you joining us. Michael McDermott also is with us. Michael's dialing in from, or not dialing in, I'm showing my age. He's joining us from Florida. Michael, will you give us a little background on you, and then we'll get started. Just a quick note, I am not too technically astute, and my cohort here, we're trying to just figure out how we can make everybody visible if people so choose. We'll work on that while Michael's giving the introduction, but otherwise we'll just continue.
Hi, everybody. My name's Mike McDermott. I'm, I would guess you'd say, a senior neurosurgeon who worked for 30 years at University of California, San Francisco. Did trauma call for a period of time, but my specialty was adult tumors. I played football growing up all the way through internship and medical school. Both my sons played football. I believed that the difference between trying to protect kids from contact sports and having them sit on the couch in the long term was worse than the small risk associated with contact sports. And it's funny that because I was, you know, I guess I really liked physics when I was going through undergrad. And I remember Newton's law, second law of motion, that force is equal to an object's mass times acceleration. And, third law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite opposing reaction. So that even though the ground looks still, if a player impacts the ground will provide a force back to the player equal to those forces. So I came up independently of Nick with my own helmet design, but we both had the same idea, and that was the complete opposite direction of all the other major helmet manufacturers. And that was primarily to reduce the weight, because that's the only weight of the helmet, because that's the only variable you can actually control. And the other helmet manufacturers were kept going the opposite way with adding more stuff. So when I remember when I had my first video conference with Nick, I texted our head of development here and said, he's reading the background to our patent application, which meant that, nothing is original, but I was glad that Nick had the right idea. And I was pretty certain that this would have no pun intended, an impact on the incidence of concussion in football and reduce it. I still remain active. I work as an NFL sideline unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant, did that for 8 years in San Francisco. We took over a year ago in Miami. And, I think anything that we can do to improve the players' welfare and long-term career path is important.
Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate it. And it's honor to have both of you guys jumping on with us. One of the things that we've done at Light is bring in experts in the field, and our opinions aren't always congruent. Discussion is good, just like competition is good. As you're aware, in the football helmet space, really, there's only 3 companies now, Riddell, and then you have Schutt that owns Visus. Zenith is no longer an independent company. The assets were just bought by Riddell. And then there's Light. And just like cell phones in the 80s and 90s, when there's only 2 competitors, the prices were high, the service was average. And the goal is to help foster competition. And it's a challenging and exciting business. We get to work with a lot of great young players. But we'll get right into prep for the season. The majority of people that we're talking to today, youth players or the parents of youth players. And we're going to touch briefly on, now I can start seeing people. There we go, faces. Hey, John, how are you, buddy? So, there's gear, there's athlete prep, there's, hey, what league are you going to get in? And we could talk for hours about all of these different things. And there's some of these that are important that we won't get too much into today. But I will tell you that one thing related to football that's important is, fatigue breeds injury. And one of the reasons that our helmets, and we've come up with lighter weight helmets, and we'll talk about the new NOxy standard that'll be rolling in over the next couple of years, and the helmet weight component of it. But your son or daughter that is going to show up and play, I mean, first off, you want to talk to other people that have played in that league to get some background in terms of the type of coaching you're going to experience, the involvement as a parent. And I encourage you as parents to embark on this journey with your son or daughter, not just sit in the sidelines. If you can be a team mom or dad, if you can coach, even if you're not there all the time, you're going to see your young person go through a whole variety of seasons, especially if it's their first time out on the field. They'll learn that there's a little bit of difference between discomfort and injury. They're going to learn to press themselves past the level of discomfort that they may have had in playing other sports. Football is unique in that it really builds grit, determination, where small goals that are accomplished as a group equate to bigger goals. And the maturity and the emotional control that your son or daughter, they'll blossom and they'll grow in this area. When you get done with the season, you'll have a completely different young person than you had at the beginning. And I will say, being a fan of football, having played football at a college level at a D3 school for a reasonably short period of time, in high school and as a young person, that is probably one of the biggest foundational elements for me to be able to run a company, to be able to deal with people of different backgrounds, to be able to motivate people and how to problem solve. And I think it's just a wonderful sport. All the sports are great, but one of the things that I would encourage is, hey, the kids need to be getting out. They need to be running. They need to be in the best shape possible before they show up. Hydration is important. Making sure that they don't just try the helmet on for 3 seconds, but they're wearing that helmet for a while because they're going to be out there running. They're not going to be comfortable. And something just like a pair of shoes that you're like, oh, these feel great while you're standing in the store. When you wear them for 2 hours and when you're sweating and you're uncomfortable, whether it's a helmet, shoulder pads, gear, etc., having these things, trying them on, making sure that they're comfortable, even if the kid's wearing it around in the house, or you get them out running around with their gear on is critical. But hydration is key. Hydration after is key. Stretching, some conditioning up front. And Peter or Mike, I'll let you chime in on the conditioning piece. I don't want to spend too much time on it because we're going to talk, helmets, and then we're going to talk what to keep an eye on with our kids as we go, as well as some of the different certifications and things that you really need to focus on protection wise. But do either of you guys have any recommendations on rolling into the season, what parents should be focused on?
Yeah, that's my job, so that's great. That's a good lead into me,
Perfect
Nick.
lead it.
We're leading. So, what the younger the athlete, I think the more fun it is to work with them because you see tremendous development and growth very quickly. When you have older athletes, you have bad habits, and then you got to and when you get people with chronic hamstring injuries, for example, they've learned a whole new gait walking pattern. You have to deprogram the brain. So it's easier to work with younger kids. It's more fun. They're really resilient. But my kind of rule with kids is that it's the idea that football, you're gonna go lift weights, you're gonna get big, you're gonna get strong, and I think that there's a lot of emphasis on that. Where really, when I deal with young athletes, I want mobility, I want stability, and then I want load. So if you can't handle your body weight, you're not going to handle weights on a barbell. So we go through a lot of work just working in 3D space. We call it neurofunctional training. And a lot of what we did with Tom and other athletes is using a lot of resistance bands, because we can take the joint through the whole range of motion, get the limbs to do 4 different things at the same time. It's like playing the drums. So the more you can condition the body and the brain and the eyes to all work together as you're building stability and mobility, and then put load in, is fantastic for kids. There's tons of just fun games. You can do cone drills, all kinds of just backyard fun with kids at the younger age and end of the spectrum. As they get older and they get a little more serious and they start lifting weights, they start trying to put on some mass and get bigger and stronger. Then you can supplement in some of the things that we do. We do a lot of plyometric type of work with heavy lifting. We make sure that because the job of the athlete is not to be a bodybuilder, it's to be able to be an athlete. Like I tell my son, Arnold Schwarzenegger may look great, but can it's a big arm day. Can you put the shampoo in your hair after you do arm day? What do you think it's going to feel like when you're on a football field if you're all pumped up? So that's not necessarily how we train athletes. That's how you get hurt. It's how you tear a muscle, how you tear a tricep, how you tear a pec. So trying to educate them on what they do. The big thing I do with younger kids that I reinforce the whole way up. And when I just spent the last year over in Birmingham, England, with the Birmingham City Soccer Club, trying to, with the other end of professionals, trying to break bad habits. Our thing that kept Tom on the field, that we use with a lot of our athletes, that anybody can do, are very simple things. Hydration, like you just talked about, and that's water. Avoid sugared stuff. Drinking Gatorade and energy drinks before and during practices after is just not good for the body or the brain or your mechanics. So water, so we do hydration, nutrition, make sure you're eating a pretty well balanced diet. Kids are kids. I don't mind, going to McDonald's once in a while, having a pizza on Friday. You got to live. So hydration, nutrition, sleep is the next big one. Probably one of the most important things you can do when you're an athlete is sleep. That's where you repair and recover, not just your brain, but all of your muscles, your immune system. Everything fixes itself at night. So hydration, nutrition, sleep, work on functional movements, and cognitive health. And that ties into a whole lot of other things about emotional health, spiritual health, all the different ways that we feel about things. Being able to think and process fast. I just wrote this article about the NFL having a QB development problem where we're training mechanics and not brains, where Tom or Peyton Manning, Dan Marino's arm velocity was really an effective their mental processing. So that's how we treat our athletes. And I start those processes very early on. When my son started playing football, like you say, he really started to identify as a football player and say, football players do their homework, football players work hard. And, he wouldn't even we'd go to have a coffee or something on a Saturday and he wouldn't get hot chocolate, no Coke. It's in season, so you instill those kind of habits and you recover better from injury. Look, sport has 100% injury rate. I don't care what the sport is, soccer, basketball, football, you're going to get hurt. And it's going to be bumps and bruises 95% of the time. And you're going to recover from those faster if you're well hydrated, you have a really well balanced diet, and you're getting good sleep. And just focus on those primary principles. And that's really where I focus early on with young kids.
That's great. I agree and concur with that. Some of this is mental prep for the parents as well as mental prep for the kid on that, hey, there's going to be the bumps and scratches and bruises, and a lot of young players that have played baseball and other sports, it's just a different level of contact and there'll be a couple week adjustment. It's different level of, explosiveness for 8 seconds, some of the running that they're going to do, and they're playing with a lot more gear. All of those things that, Peter discussed in terms of prep, hydration, flexibility, etc. Also, having your ducks in a row, hey, you got a first aid kit. A lot of us are playing on turf and not on grass, and you get, scuffs, and that turf just breeds bacteria. You're going to want to get that cleaned up after a practice and, get some Neosporin or other, similar, antiseptic type product on it. Have your first aid kit ready, some ice. You're going to go through things like that. Again, hydration after, and then have your list of doctors set up and, the urgent care and things like that. Hopefully you never have to use it, and you probably won't, but it's always good to have those things queued up and lined up in advance. One of the things is when you are going through the line for equipment, get there early, go and make friends with somebody in the equipment line, because there's the newest, greatest stuff. And then there's stuff that's been sitting in the shipping container for 5 years that just keeps getting pushed to the back. And I hate to say it, but hey, it's, kind of, who do you know? If you go there and say, man, my son or daughter is, and you're there 15 minutes early and you help them bring the stuff out, you're going to get the newer stuff. Now, of course, hopefully you go to the Light Helmet site and buy something from us, but in the event you don't, you certainly want to get there early enough, because things are, the equipment that most of the Pop Warners have, helmets age out, I think, after 10 years. And that's NOxI, and I'll bring that topic up, and people ask what NOxI is. I've been doing this for a while, and I still can't say it from memory. So it's the National Operating Committee on Standards for Athletic Equipment. And people are like, gosh, what do they do? If you look at the back of your son or daughter's helmet, there'll be a NOxI sticker, and it'll have a year on it. And whether the helmet's new or whether it's been used in the past, which is pretty normal, the helmets need to be refurbished every 1 or 2 years. And that means that they have to be inspected to make sure that they're safe. They have to be cleaned up, any parts or pieces replaced. And NOxI also makes sure that the helmet companies are meeting minimum standards in terms of the products themselves, the supply line, that we can do recalls if necessary, that we're monitoring all the pieces and parts, not quite to the level of like an aircraft, but that's the concept, to make sure that we've got good control over what young people are wearing. And that goes all the way through up to the NFL. So you're protected by that same standard. People ask me with some frequency, gosh, what's the difference between NOxI, these Virginia Tech ratings that we hear about, and NFL ratings? So the fastest NFL players can run 23 miles an hour, just a tick faster than that. Most youth players, the only time they're going to be going 23 miles an hour is in the SUV on the way to or from practice. When you think about 2 NFL players running at each other with a closing speed of 46 miles an hour, albeit rare, it's certainly possible. And each guy weighs, let's say, 220 pounds. That's like me on a dirt bike driving and running into Peter at 46 miles an hour. The weight and the speed, it's fairly scary, right? Now, our sons and daughters at the different levels of play are not having impacts at that level. So the helmets that are being worn are designed for the window of impact, meaning the speed and the mass of the player. So what NOxI looks at in their standards, what Virginia Tech looks at, and Virginia Tech has a varsity standard and a youth standard. The varsity standard is really designed for players, I would say, upwards of 130, 140 pounds. And then the youth standard goes below that. There's actually some youth helmets that weigh 6 pounds. So if you have a 6 or 7-year-old kid that weighs 60 pounds, it'd be, I'm giving my weight away, no laughing, Brad, especially from you, because you're the first guy to have your camera on. But if I'm wearing a 22-pound helmet, if I weigh 220, that's not good for anybody. So when you have a young player with an underdeveloped neck wearing a 6-pound helmet, that's problematic. So NOxI has a varsity standard and a youth standard. They are employing, after 2 fairly deep studies, one at the University of Ottawa and the other one at Virginia Tech, there's a standard that the youth helmets over the next couple of years here will be phased in, that they have to be under 3.5 pounds if you're under 14 years old. I'll say with some level of pride, that's the name of the company. Light Helmets are already there. There, I'm sure, will be competitive helmets in that space, but weight, whether it's at a youth level or at a more senior level, is key. We're going to talk about that in a second. But when you're at that equipment line and you're going through, one of the biggest things is inspect the product or inspect the helmet that your son or daughter is going to be wearing. Make sure it's got all the pieces and parts on it. Newer is better. You can do a little study in advance. You can print out the Virginia Tech report and look and see what you're receiving. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But fit is key. If you could make a list of things in terms of getting the equipment that you need, you could take the best helmet ever made, and if it doesn't fit your son or daughter correctly, it does them no good. That fit is key. And, you know, all joking aside, the shape of the Armenian guy's head is a different shape than the Polynesian guy's head, even though the circumference of the head is the same. So how that helmet fits, how it can be customized. So some helmets have air. Some helmets have different pads. Some helmets have shims that let those pads expand. Those are things that you can use and try while you're there. Now, here's why I'm telling you to get there early. Everyone's a lot more patient out of the parents that are handing out the equipment when you're the first one through the line than when 200 kids have come through with ice cream cones and, you know, McDonald's and everything else, and the pads are everywhere and the brothers and sisters are screaming and scrambling equipment. So get there early and look at what you've got before you get through. Remember, that helmet that's got air in it, the air, just like a tire, leaks out of it over time. We don't use air in our helmets for that reason. If you're playing at a high elevation, it's overinflated. If you're playing at a low elevation, it's underinflated. If it's hot, it's overinflated. Cold at night, underinflated. There's all of those things to take into consideration, but I will say the Virginia Tech standards for the kids, 5-star, you always want to have a 5-star helmet. That they rank helmets 5 all the way down to 1. You know, we'll take the trophy for having the #1 varsity helmet. Our youth helmet is a 5-star helmet. The new Apache youth helmet will be out shortly. More on that later on. But you want a 5-star helmet. You want it to fit properly, have it in good condition. Make sure that that Noxie sticker is, you know, the next year, so that you don't have a helmet that's expired. And then chin strap, how that chin strap is on the helmet doesn't do any good for your son or daughter when the helmet pops off. So making sure the chin strap's on and that's comfortable so they're not dying to take it off. I don't know, Peter or Michael, if you want to add on, you know, anything in that generic helmet selection that you think might be helpful.
No, not really. I mean, you're the expert in helmet prototyping and new design, so I don't really have anything else to add.
Peter, how about you?
I just agree with you. Having been a youth football coach and had to suffer through handing out the equipment, get there early. Just because it just makes it better on everybody, you know, people maybe, you know, get I don't want to say less careful, but they're tired. You know, you've gone through an entire league of kids, and you know, it makes everybody's life easier if you get there. Your fit's better, your confidence is better. If your gear fits, your confidence is high. If your confidence is high, you play well. If your helmet is loose and all over the place, your shoulder pads are too big, and all these other things, then you're not going to feel comfortable on the football field. And I just always appreciated when families would get there early. We would do it over a couple of days, so we didn't have to worry about you know, the big rush of everybody. But that's a good tip.
Yeah, and just getting back to the standards again, all the helmets that you're going to be either purchasing, whether you buy them at Dick's, Shields, Plate Again, or Walmart, one thing to keep in mind there is the majority of those helmets that you're buying there are youth helmets, and they're going to be in a white shell with a gray face mask, and your league may require something completely different. Now what do? I have to send it in to get painted. When you buy direct to consumer, meaning you're buying off the website, let's say you get a helmet, it smells like feet, and the date on the back of the helmet says, you know, 2024, you're like, gosh, what am I going to do here? So you jump online to order a helmet. You may want to call customer service first if it's a different company to find out how long it's going to take to get, because you may have to wear that other helmet for a couple of days. Direct to consumer orders for us, unless it's a crazy color or some type of custom dip face mask, usually is shipped out within a week. Our competitors aren't too bad. If it's a standard color, it might take a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks. But man, if you're ordering team orders and it's custom from a competitor, it can take up to 20 weeks. From us, it might be 3 weeks, 4 weeks at the max. We can trim it down as quick as 2 if it's a standard color. The other thing is when you order something and the box shows up, make sure that when you're ordering, the large for a shut, the large for a Riddell, and the large for a light might be different. Everybody uses a different table. So make sure that whatever you're going to buy online that you're actually going and looking at that manufacturer's measuring tool to, you have a soft measuring tape to measure the head, usually do it on the widest part of the head, take the biggest measurement, try it a couple of times. And I mean, if your kid is going from the Michael Jackson hair in the early 70s, to far less hair, need to take that into consideration, get that haircut done, in advance. Now, when the helmet shows up, don't let it sit for 2 weeks and pull it out right before the first practice. You want to get that helmet, have them try it on. Does it fit? Does it not fit? There's subtle adjustments, like ours comes with shims. So if you have Ernie from Sesame Street that's got the spaceship head versus Bert who's got the cone head, you can make adjustments to the helmet so that it fits properly. But you may end up with a helmet that doesn't quite get there. You need to get that thing sent back and think about the millions of people that are sending helmets in and out, all within a short window of time. So the faster and earlier all these things happen, the better. Now, when that young player puts that helmet on and they try it on, just like the pair of new cool shoes, right? They put that thing on, they have it on for 3 minutes, and then they leave. Well, now it's going to be 85 degrees or 90 degrees, and they're going to be having somebody telling them to run like they've never run before. They're going to be doing new drills. They're going to be nervous. There's going to be kids that have been playing longer, and the first thing's going to be, gosh, my neck hurts, my head hurts, et cetera, et cetera. One of those things is that we've discussed and why we design our products the way we do is the lighter, the better. And now there are a wide spectrum of helmet weights from our competitors, but I will tell you that the weight component of the helmet, and the reason that, one of the reasons that Noxie went through this, and you'll see in new advertisements, even from our competitors, is feels lighter, or it's only 8 ounces lighter. Well, our stuff in some cases 2.5 pounds lighter than competitive helmet. Fatigue creates injury, and I'm going to let Michael or Peter have this discussion. But when you walk out and in the first 30 minutes of practice versus the last 30 minutes of practice, you'll see far more injuries late in a practice, not just a head or a neck, but man, you're hot, you're sweating, your neck is not designed. These are not NFL players. And even with NFL players, helmet weight matters. But when you have a young player and now you're adding a 3, 4, 5, or 6 pound helmet to their head, and they're getting banged around and they're getting up and they're running, they're doing all these different exercises, man, that thing starts to get heavy and it creates fatigue. Think about an 80G or a 60G impact. An extra 3 pounds is 160, or I'm sorry, 3 pounds, 80 Gs, 240 pounds of additional stress and at that type of impact that your cervical structure is managing. And, everything is not binary where, hey, this is an injury and this isn't an injury. All those bumps and bangs, et cetera, you can reduce that force by reducing the weight, assuming the helmet fits right, it's of good quality. You're picking something that's higher up on that Virginia Tech list. One thing I will say is people will look at the NFL list, and our helmets now are up at the top of that NFL list. Don't use that list. On the bottom of the NFL quote unquote poster, they now have position specific helmets for quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, generic NFL helmets. You'll look and say, my gosh, the light Apache Pro, I need to have that for my 9-year-old kid. We love the light Apache Pro, but it's the last thing your 9-year-old kid should be wearing. Your kid should be wearing the Apache Lightning or the LS2 youth helmet. That helmet is not designed for a young player. Now, if you look on the bottom of the NFL poster, which is entertaining to look at, but provides no substantive value for anyone at a high school level or a youth level, it says right on the bottom, do not extrapolate this data for collegiate, high school, or youth football. But hey, the NFL has spent a lot of money trying to protect their players. And there's a lot of people that are skeptical about the helmet companies, the NFL, the NCAA, et cetera. I will tell you here from experience, we don't agree with how all of our competitors build helmets. We don't agree with everything in the NFL testing. But there's not a single person that is with any intent or malice trying to cause harm to any of these great young people. It just doesn't exist or happen. We have different philosophies on how to get there. Now, because we're a quick and nimble company, we have brilliant guys like Michael and Peter, as well as our great engineer, Kodiak Brush. Isn't that a great name? He went to school at MIT and played football there. In the Cam Jordans that own part of our company, the Tyrod Taylors, the Tony Romos, the Drew Stattons, the Ben Barches, Darius Robinson. I could go through the list. Cam Rising. These people care about the players. The people at Riddell do. The people at Shutt do. The people at the NFL do. Plus, the financial equation is you want the best players on the field because more eyes on, better media dollars. But we have different ideas and we can move at different paces and we have different people to answer to. And fortunately, the only people we have to answer to is our board and our people that work with us like Peter and Michael because they're putting their stamp of approval. There are a lot of people that have lined up to endorse our product that we've not talked to. But if you look up the people that we do have involved, they take great pride in what we do, and we take great pride in having them involved. Those NFL ratings are fantastic for the NFL player. But even at the end of the season, the NFL players don't get the concussion data that's really happened on the field, meaning they don't get the per play, by helmet, by position concussion data. You'd think you would want the real on-field data versus just what happens in the lab. The way these helmets are tested in the lab is the NFL has a head form and they shoot a pneumatic ram at it, hit it in different places. The quarterback helmet's judged a little differently than the O and D line helmets. No player in the history of football has just stood there and gotten ear-holed in a completely static environment. You know, if you take your glass that's sitting on your desk and you hold it firmly and tap it and you watch what happens to the contents on the inside, it's very different than if you slide it and bump it. That doesn't mean that the NFL test doesn't have value. It just means that it doesn't take all the variables into consideration, but it's not applicable for your son or daughter that's playing high school or youth sports. I would leave that to the Virginia Tech varsity or youth standard. That's the helmet side of things. Mark Wright, who you'll see his name floating on here, is running this podcast for us. He'll send everybody out a discount code. And there's also information at lighthelmets.com where you can ask questions and we'll get back to you within one business day related to anything we talk about today, but also anything related to if you want to acquire a helmet or you have questions about our product or frankly competitive products. But he'll send a discount code out that covers across the board. So, but I want to defer a bit to Michael and to Peter to talk about fatigue and the dynamics of weight and how that's important when it comes to the young player before we go to the next level, which we're going to talk about just keeping an eye on your kid, looking for injury and things like that.
I defer to Peter.
I was going to say, I'm going to let Mike talk because I feel like I've been talking too much. I don't know if anybody else's kid is like my kid, but as soon as the football helmet entered his life, he never took it off, right? I mean, he just wore it everywhere, which I thought was great because I want him wearing that helmet because it's a couple weeks before the season starts. The helmet's here, the gear's here. I think one of the things we try to do is get equipment out to kids before the season started early enough so that they could play with it. Dress up as a football player, run around the house, run around the backyard, and just sort of get used to wearing that kind of stuff. So, I might let my son wear the helmet around all over the place, and we'd go out and play pass with it, and just get used to wearing it. Because we used to do, and every team, every league, everybody's different, but we always had every practice was helmet at least, just because we wanted kids to be able to wear the helmet. A lot of practices were uppers, were just shoulder pads and helmets, and then one day a week we'd have full pad where we did a little bit more contact drills. But wearing the helmet is so key because they got to get used to it. It feels different, especially if you're switching helmets or switching brands. The more you can wear the helmet, the more comfortable you can be with it. And we've had that situation happen where we've been in different leagues or different schools, and we've had different helmets. And some of them we had to wear a competitor helmet, and that was an adjustment because we'd been wearing a light helmet for so long. And then we got back into a light helmet, and that was an adjustment to get back into the light helmet because it really does feel very different. Having worn both myself, There's a noticeable weight difference when you put on a light helmet, which is in a good way. Um, so let your kid wear the helmet and let them play with it, him or her, whoever. Let them just have fun being a football player at a young age. And I think that helmets and gear are part of the things that really get some kids really excited about playing the sport. So as for fatigue, we tried to go and this is where you might want to, have conversations with your coaches too, what their practice plans are. Every coach should have, we might get into this a little bit later, so I won't get into it too much. Every coach should have a practice plan for that week and what that entails and how much load the kids are going to be given throughout the week. Um, we had our biggest day was on Tuesdays because we had games on Sundays. So Monday would kind of be a very light day. Our heavy day was Tuesday. We kind of tapered down for the week to get ready for Saturday because we don't want kids hurt at the end of the week because they get tired, they're at school, they got other things going on in their lives, so talking to your coaches about what their player load and expectation is important. Um, but we did, towards the end of the season, towards the end of the week, injuries creep up, and there's a difference between, and this is a beautiful thing I think with football. To your point you made earlier, Nick, that has some uniqueness to football, but you do see it in other sports, like hockey. You do see it in soccer. We're learning the difference between playing hurt and playing injured, where something may hurt and it's going to hurt, and that's okay, versus something that's injured that you're going to make it worse if you play. So understanding those differences and my son knows this now. He's older now. He's going into college next year to play football, so he gets a little bit more rough from me. But I would say, don't give pain a voice because every time you do, it wins the argument. So differentiating that idea, like he comes home from track, he's got a pulled hamstring. He's like, no, it's just I feel the weakness leaving. It's getting stronger. So that's how we interpret pain, and it gives you a really great opportunity to try to learn how to deal with pain. Because unfortunately, we all have pain in our lives. Every one of us in this call has something that's probably hurting us right now, physically, emotionally, mentally. And how do we deal with it? How the brain, and Michael can talk about this too, how the brain interprets pain. The brain doesn't know any different from me saying it hurts than somebody else telling me that I'm hurt. So it doesn't differentiate; just knows it hurts. So if I say, "Oh, that really hurts," then I'm going to focus on it rather than say, "No, I feel like it's getting better. It's getting better today." When it is getting better, it may still hurt, but it's getting better, and the brain hears that and it conditions it. So it's a great way to kind of learn how to deal with pain because someday when you grow up, you're not going to be able to you're not going to get sick days sometimes. You're not going to. I know being a doctor, you don't get sick days. You don't get to have some reason to not go to work or something. So it makes you a better boss, better employee, better structured person to be able to overcome obstacles. If you look at any of the people in the draft, or whether NBA draft, NFL draft, the one thing they all have in common is adversity, and teaches you how to overcome those adversity by learning how to overcome yourself in a lot of ways in your own limitations and push those. So, encourage your kid, love your kid, but also, understand that, football is a tough sport for tough kids, and it's a smart sport for smart kids. You got to be really smart to play this game too, and embrace all of that to it. But wear the helmet, watch out for fatigue, make sure if they are getting tired, that the best way we would do with load you can extrapolate this from the professional world into the youth world, is I'm not changing somebody's load at the end of a season. When we're on a playoff run, or we're fighting for relegation, I'm not going to change a player's load. I need you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to increase their recovery. So I'm going to find ways how they are not recovering well. Are we hydrated? Are we sleeping? I'm going to really look at what they're eating and how they're sleeping, and if they're drinking enough water, because that's going to give me the biggest advantage at the end of a week, at the end of a season, to help an athlete perform at the best that they can at that point in time. No one's 100% at the end of a season, but you got to give 100% whatever you've got at the end of the season. And that 100% of what you got can be more if you're better equipped and have more resiliency built in through just simple things, sleep, hydration, nutrition. And I can't preach that enough.
I was going to make two comments. The one about Nick saying in high school, I remember going to the room where they had all the helmets, right? And they were lying all over the floor. or on shelving, and they looked like they were from the 1970s or something. They were all worn out. We would try different ones, put them on. And then you compare that with the anxiety of parents who have young boys playing contact sports and football in particular, and why they would not invest in a more specific helmet for their son or daughter. It's not much money, and the long-term return on investment might be important, right? So I'd never really, now there's an increased awareness, increased availability of being able to access helmets because we can do it online, go to Dick's Sporting Goods. You couldn't do that back in the 70s, early 80s. It just didn't happen. But one thing about the fatigue is that in-season statistics show that in the NFL, in the second half, the incidence of concussion is higher. And those of us who watch TV or on the sidelines know that the players are the most jacked up and running harder in the first half, which would lead you to suspect there might be a higher incidence in the first half. But no, it's the second half, and I think that's the fatigue. So I think it does make a difference.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, there's if you get done with this, a great video for your kids, but it's also a lesson for us as adults. If you just YouTube Jimmy Johnson and the word fatigue, and he goes on to tell these players that the Miami Hurricanes, fatigue makes cowards of all of us, and it does. And you're going to see that as you watch your kids play. If you're a parent and you've had a kid play football, a lot of the things that we're talking about are might be just refreshing your memory. But if you've got a son or a daughter that's not played before, you will see fatigue play a psychological fatigue and physical fatigue, and they're tied together, not only as it's tied to injury, but it's tied to how that team will finish. But it also will be, what is your ride home in the car like with your son or daughter? Now, I'm not a psychologist. I've probably taken a couple of classes along the way, but I have had two kids that have played, and my younger son, who ended up going to the University of Utah, got cut, then brought back on, and they gave him a spot at San Diego State and UNLV. Didn't want to transfer. And with the portal now, if you're 18 years old and you're going to a big school, it's very difficult to make the team. But if you do, you get a brand new pickup truck or Grand Cherokee for $1, and you have all the tutors and everything else. But the point is that let the kids enjoy what they're doing today as opposed to what we as parents could envision them doing in the future. They'll find their own path. And someone that blossoms at a younger age, sometimes the sport's not for them. Football's done with all of us before we're done with football. But that added pressure for the young person, I don't think it necessarily helps. We want to push them through the challenges and help them get through it on their own, but let them enjoy the day. But when you're on that trip home, they're going to share a lot of things with you. And sometimes you just ask a couple of questions and they'll share more with you about, and it really opens the parent, young person conduit up on all levels. If you have that stress conversation with your kids with some frequency and you find out you listen to them on the way home from practice, that conduit will carry over into other aspects, which is great stuff. Now, hey, that kid's hammering water on the way home. They probably want to eat chicken McNuggets, which I won't get into that, but probably not on Peter's nutritional list of what to have, but having good snacks ready for them, making sure they're drinking while they're playing. But also this goes back to, hey, that equipment that you looked at so closely at the beginning of the year or when you first got it, you need to look at that stuff periodically because the kids are not looking at this stuff. High school kids don't look at it. Younger players don't look at it. You would certainly not go out and run the Indy 500 qualifying and then not inspect the car and run it in the race. But that's what happens with 99% of the football equipment. So if you have a helmet with air, if you have a helmet that has different adjustments to it, you need to go back and check those. When we designed our stuff, we looked at what does the military do? Because your ballistic helmet's got to work when it's 20 below zero or 130 degrees and you're in, the Middle East somewhere. It's got to work when it's saturated. It's got to work when it's sat on the side and it's cold. Think about your son or daughter's a punter. They warm up early and your team is kicking butt and they're just racing up and down the field and they don't punt. and that helmet's not been put on for an hour and a half, and you're playing in Wisconsin in November, that helmet's like a rock when you put it back on. You know, leaving that helmet on, there's a lot of little idiosyncrasies to all of this. I will say that the game's safer now to play than it's ever been. The coaching has gotten better. The protective equipment's gotten better. The turf has gotten better. The care has gotten better. But I would like to ask, and I will say two things before I ask this question. One is, no football helmet can protect against all foreseeable impacts. We feel we have the best product in the market. We defer to Virginia Tech in terms of their #1 rating for varsity. You'll see the new rating for the youth helmet soon. You know, for NFL players, our ratings are there as well. But when players are, and every state has different rules for this. Your son or daughter will go through like a concussion protocol prior to the season, whether they're taking a test on an app, whether they're doing a gait analysis. There's all different things to look for. Nothing that our two docs are going to share today is all encompassing, but guys, if you could just share, hey, when does my yellow light go on with my son or daughter in game or post game? And, you know, what is my caution and what should I do?
Well, I would say that in high school football, it was rare until just recently for the trainers to want to have any interaction with me, even though I was the unofficial photographer on the sideline. But I actually once saved a young boy's life and diagnosed a splenic rupture on the field across from a trauma hospital. And they were the other physician, home team physician, was going to take him to the dressing room. So he probably would have died of hypothalamic.
What's a splenic for those of us that are,
yeah, sorry. Spleen is on the left side, just below your rib cage in your abdominal cavity. But it's not, that's the thing that'll get ruptured with blunt force trauma more so than the liver. But I think when the kids, I mean, if you're on the sideline, you're evaluating something, it's at the same level of observation as it is with the NFL. See a big contact, somebody slow, motor instability, problems getting up, comes off complaining, you know, even without that, comes off complaining of headache, dizziness, ringing, buzz in the ears, feeling nauseated. Even after the game, that's a signal that they had a big event and they probably need to be observed overnight, not in a hospital, but pay attention to them at home, make sure the symptoms don't get worse. And I've only taken one NFL player in 10 years to an emergency department for a CT scan for persistent symptoms, and his symptoms resolved on the way to the hospital. So the incidence of something really bad cranially happening is incredibly rare. But I think, you know, if a kid's not feeling well the day after a game in terms of having symptoms of headache, dizziness, nausea, having problems concentrating, every high school, I think, and should do the impact testing before the start of the season as a baseline. And you should take them back to the athletic trainer and tell them what's up, and they will repeat the impact test for the player. And if it's off, then they won't let them practice. They won't let them play until their symptoms resolve. They repeat the impact test and they're back towards baseline.
Is the impact test a cognitive test that you use?
Yeah, we started it way back in the early 2000s for lacrosse. And at that time, it was sit down at a desktop kind of and do it, but now it's all iPad based. And it's been replaced by the SCAT3. So, and at least in the NFL, but for amateur sports, I'm not sure what the current testing is. I know even for professional race car drivers, they're still using the impact test because I have a driver who has some symptoms, and I made him go back and do that with his team.
Yeah, that's you know, auto racing. I had too many concussions, probably 7 over a course of 600 in some races. But you know, when I played football in the late 80s and, you know, just a shade, a scotch into the early 90s, now you know how old I am. None of this was measured, right? And I will say that and I'm not going to endorse, and I'm not going to not endorse. There's so many different tests in terms of being able to diagnose potential injury, and I'm not a doctor, but your league most likely will have one of those. So just be familiar with it, as opposed to learning about it after the fact doesn't do you any good. A lot of it is the young person will take a test, and it'll be on an iPad or an iPhone. And then if they feel there's an event, they're going to take that test again. And the pace at which they go through the test will determine whether they, are diagnosed with a potential of an injury or not. But, I always err on the side of, hey, taking some action and being cautious. And I think that the docs that are here will concur that you really just need to be conscious of what's going on. You know your kid better than anyone else, and you're going to make a decision based on what you observe. But like I said earlier, this is safer to play than it's ever been in the
Yeah.
past. The equipment's gotten better. We love to have everybody that's on this call in our helmet as our footprint starts to expand in the space. We've gone through a lot of learning in terms of what's the best way to put it? The materials. The helmet is a system. The right helmet for the right age player, reducing the weight, the level of comfort, the fact that the player remains cool and that they are not overheated, because that's another thing that, a helmet can do is, you think about it, you could be playing in 60-degree weather outside, but inside the helmet, if you took it off and shot it with a pyrometer, it's hot. It can be, well over 110 degrees. And when it's really hot outside, that becomes an issue. So all these things are things we've taken into consideration. And, I'd like to wrap up with Peter or Michael, if you guys have anything that you want to close with. And then I'll just say that I've got a couple of questions that I'll go through once the guys are done that people post to the group.
I think Mike's got to take off. But I just want to touch on some stuff that Mike brought up, just some great points there and some things that you talked about, Nick. I wish I'd had that conversation with you about the car ride after practice before I started coaching, because my car rides home from practice were not that productive. There's a lot of yelling. So, you know, um, and to piggyback on that, coaching youth football, having been through the whole spectrum, was probably, I think back now because my son is matriculating into college football in a whole different world, was an incredibly special time. It was so much fun, and with not putting that pressure on them to think about going to the D1 schools and playing in the NFL. It's a great dream. I want to be an astronaut. I want to play in the NFL. Everybody, great to dream, but enjoy that experience of being in youth football, because those kids are just so much fun, and it's so much fun to coach them. And it's one of my favorite memories is coaching youth football. From flag football, I coached flag and tackle at the same time with youth, and it was just an absolute joy to be around those kids and the parents. And one thing to note, my yellow light and for warning signs is, and every league, every school is going to be different. Not everybody uses impact. Some use other tests. There's something called Sway. There's something called Sportgate. I think Scat, Impact, Sportgate, and Sway are probably the biggest ones that you'll hear. Everyone will have something. You'll do a baseline, and then you'll compare to that baseline if something happens. For me, because I just have the technology and access to the kids, I would do everybody every couple of weeks just to see where they were. Because again, I'm kind of measuring fatigue. Some of the reaction times in cognitive processing and the little cognitive tests in some of those can tell me if somebody's tired. And then we can figure out what's going on. When the brain gets tired, the reaction time slows and they can get hurt. So a lot of that technology is out there to be able to do that, and to do that from home now as well, with the app-based tests that are there. Every league and youth should have an athletic trainer, EMT, or some medical staff present. If they don't, find a new league. It's a state law in I think 50 states. Now the athletic trainers have to be present at youth football games. In our state, when I lived in Massachusetts, I live in Maine now, but in Massachusetts, the referees were not allowed to kick off the game unless there was medical staff present. So people take it very seriously. Every team should have a designated safety officer for that game. And I will tell you from coaching a bunch of young boys from eighth, 8 years old through eighth grade, and it's like herding cats. And there's so much going on. I'm just not just trying to call plays. I'm trying to find out where kids are. Right. So I'm not always going to see everything that comes off the field. I'm not going to see every play. I'm not going to see every hit. So if a kid gets a ding, I might miss it. But if I have a safety officer whose role for that game is to watch, like a spotter in the NFL, to watch. I've also been in the other side, as a parent and gone down and been like, hey, take a look at Johnny over here. Just take a look. That was a pretty big hit. So we're all gatekeepers in that. If you're a parent and you see something, say something, because not everybody sees the full field, pun totally intended. Head grabbing. The big thing for me is a wobble, and a wobble can be anything. You take a hit to the chest, hit to the belly, get the air knocked out of you, and you can wobble. But if I see a wobble, I'm taking a helmet. I'm just gonna, hey, how's it going? Where are we with life? And go through some of the questions that I need to know to see if everything is okay. That being said, the number of concussions I've experienced in youth football is very low. I mean, I think I was when I ran a flag league and the tackle football league at the same time, I was probably on the field more for head contact collisions in flag football than I was in our tackle football. There was one year, the worst injury we had in our youth football team was a bee sting, when a bee got down into a kid's shoulder pads and stung him on the shoulder. Right. So we took it very seriously, and but it was carnage on the flag football field because these kids are running at full speed, grabbing flags, and without the it's a collision sport. Flag football, it's not supposed to be. So every concussion is different, and every concussion is like a snowflake. No two are alike. And you hear every parent should take the responsibility to understand and learn what the CDC has a heads up course that can teach you the signs and symptoms for parents and what to look for concussions. But concussion fights dirty, and it will use whatever vulnerability you have against you. For example, my son has ADHD. When he had a concussion falling off a bike and hit his head on the ground, he came home, and I did the whole, are you okay, with all the questions, and he seemed fine, no headache, no nausea, nothing. But that night it was like he drank 85 Mountain Dews. I mean, he was just off the wall crazy, couldn't get to sleep. I was like, this is his concussion. So your area of weakness, whatever you have, the less what's called plasticity, or the most resilient, the least resilient part of your brain is going to manifest. Had a girl who played basketball, fell, hit her head. No one thought anything of it, no symptoms. Her mother happened to mention the next day, oh, she felt car sick on the way home. She felt car sick on the way into school today. And I said, well, does she feel car sick a lot? She's like, yeah, she has car sickness. And I was like, on long drives. I said, well, she may have a vestibular issue with a concussion. So we did some vestibular, some tests. Vestibular is your inner ear and your balance. So we did some balance stuff, and she was all over the place. And her symptom was motion sickness, because she had a susceptibility to motion sickness. And when I took pediatrics in medical school, our professor said, pediatrics is a lot like veterinary medicine. The dog isn't going to tell you that it's sick, just not going to be right. And listen to the parents. I don't care what the lab says. I don't care what the scan says. If mom and dad say something isn't right, something isn't right. So your child better than anybody. If something doesn't seem right, maybe something isn't right, and it's best to get it looked at. The number of youth football players I've sent to the hospital for concussion is 0. The number of high school kids I've sent to the emergency room for concussion, 1, who deteriorated really rapidly. But he recovered and was back on the field and didn't miss a game. He recovered very, very quickly. So the least common injury that I see, but the one that that has to be taken very seriously. I see a lot more hamstrings, calves, ribs, shoulders, elbows, knees than I do concussions. But be on the lookout for them, and be the gatekeeper. I think one of the things, to Nick's point, a lot of the bad media has really been really productive for football. And I think it's fallen on us as parents and coaches to take ownership of the sport without a whole lot of leadership and guidance from any national governing bodies, and force these changes ourselves because we wanted to preserve the sport. And I think we should be really proud as football families of what we've done. I think football is probably the role model for sports safety. And from watching my nephews play youth hockey and basketball and other sports, I think that a lot of sports could learn from what we did and how we accomplished what we've accomplished. I don't think there's a safer time to enter football than there is right now. It's just going to get better. And I think that is a real statement to how much people love this game, who give their time to the game. The coaches, parents, families, people who want this sport to survive have done an incredible job improving the safety. Those are my wrap-up remarks.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate that. You know, I'm going to run into I've got 4 questions here, 5 questions that I'll repeat that all of you guys submitted. I will say a couple things. Guys, like I'll use Tyrod Taylor as an example, that bought all of his high school players light helmets, and then went and bought all of his youth, everyone from the youth league light helmets. Michael Strahan called us up and ended up buying helmets for everyone at Texas Southern University. Doug Bland for the Wheelers in Pennsylvania. You know, we've got some number 1 and number 2 running backs in the NFL that are working out in our helmets. I can't say the names yet because they tell us not to until they're for sure going to wear it. But exciting times. And like I said, there are a lot of people shoulder to shoulder with parents. If someone's parents haven't ever had their kids play football, and they'll ask you, why are you letting your kid play football? You know, you get those questions, and you just wish they could stand by you to see how the kids interact. And whether it's someone at an AYF event in Florida, and it's a 6-year-old, you know, saying yes sir, no sir, or you walk into the Raiders locker room and somebody taps me on the shoulder and says, "Sir, will you mind telling me about, you know, the light Apache?" It's just remarkable what great people we've met in this space. And you're embarking on a new journey with your son or daughter, and hopefully we're a part of it. And if not, we want them to be safe either way. Wearing our competitors' products, and hopefully today helped a little bit. All right, these questions, and most of them are specific to light. What's the outer shell compromise to reduce the shock versus the interior, which is always being talked about? How does it give or absorb the blow? So our helmets are designed as a system. So it's not like internal padding, external shell. The whole helmet is designed to crumple and provide a buffer and take that impact and spread it out over the longest period of time, which is the less jarring. There's the direct impact, there's rotational impact when you start moving things around, and the geometry of the internal works with the shell. Our Apache shell, Gladiator shell, it's actually flexible, and it works with the internal of the helmet to take that blow and absorb that impact. And whether it's head to head, head to another part of the body, or head to ground, the whole helmet's working as a system. There are different fitment pads on the inside for varsity helmets than there is for the youth helmets. They're a little bit softer. Our LS2 helmets, which are made of either Kevlar or a composite aramid. Kevlar is a trade name for a material that spreads the impact out. And we have an expanded polypropylene liner on the inside. Those helmets are very light. Both helmets operate a little bit differently because of the different types of impacts that we see on field and the different sizes of the players and speeds. But the shell of the Apache and the Gladiator is a malleable shell, and it's a nylon 6 material. Not that that means anything to anyone, including me, but the engineer tells me that's the specific material. I'm big into youth football gear because of my 9-year-old son. My question is, will the youth Apache model have 3D printed lattice or the EPP pods like the Lightning model? Also, will the youth have a smaller shell than the youth LS2? So 3 questions mixed in there. We do have a youth Apache coming out, and it has the same 3D lattice as the Apache for varsity and the Apache Pro. It's just that the lattice is designed to absorb impacts that level player will experience. They don't need that 23-mile-an-hour impact, because when you build a helmet for that 23-mile-an-hour speed, you're giving up something on the lower speed. Doesn't provide as protective a quality. So we build a helmet for that range. We'll have an Apache with a 3D liner. It should be available for sale in the next 30 days. I'm probably making some of my production people cringe, but that's the plan. And then there is going to be an Apache Lightning Youth. And the difference between the Apache and the Apache Lightning is the Lightning is a little bit lighter, but it uses the same material in the form of cubes in the same lattice as the regular Apache, meaning it's lighter and it's a little bit less expensive. Costs about $150 less than the Apache with a full 3D printed internal. If my son or daughter's playing and they're under 12 years old, I'm going to go with a lighter helmet. It would be the Youth Lightning. And again, that helmet's probably 6 weeks out. The regular Youth Apache's 4 weeks out. Apache's varsity right now. So if a varsity player that, let's say, is between 12, or they're playing through high school, if they're a bigger 12-year-old, the Apache and the Lightning now, that you can order those online. Will you be able to recondition helmets with normal reconditioners that teams use, or will it have to be through a light itself? Will you sell through sport equipment reps, or can we only buy through you like Riddell? Can we get a sample? So a couple questions in there. Right now, we've been very, very careful in reconditioning everything ourselves. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, we're using some unique materials. So we don't want people using the wrong solvents, etc. When you have an uncontrolled environment, we always worry about that. It compromises the helmet, and we're unaware of that. You know that if you have 4 vendors doing something, you get 4 different products back. Don't necessarily love McDonald's, but when you get a Big Mac, it's always the same because it's a factory store. There's a recipe for it. We have a recipe how we recondition. That said, we are, for the first time, certifying reconditioners, and they're having to go through a pretty arduous process where we send somebody out on site to get them up to speed. There are a list of those on our website, so that'll give you a better idea if you're in one of those areas. The worst case scenario is you're shipping it to us. There's 2 levels of reconditioning. Unlike our competitors, you don't get a dental bill back where you don't know how much it's going to cost. A lot of times someone will send 100 helmets in, they get 80 back and say 20 of them had catastrophic failures, meaning you got to buy 20 new helmets, and your others might cost between 60 and a couple $100 to get reconditioned. If you send us 100, you get 100 back. We don't play any games there. And then there's just 2 flat rate reconditioned amounts. So whether you send them to us or whether they go to one of the third-party reconditioners that'll be listed on the site, you'll be handled. Some of the helmets, obviously, you'll get, they're not as beat up. They don't need to go through a full paint, etc. It's the lower level. As far as dealers, we do a lot of business direct to consumer. We have helmets in select stores at Shields, Academy, Play It Again, Dick's, and online at Walmart. It depends on your area. I think there are 750 Dick's stores, and we may be in just over 100 of them. So I can't give you the specifics there, but we do have dealers scattered around. And again, on our website, it will show you who the dealer is in your area. Or you can simply send an email to info@lighthelmets.com or sales@lighthelmets.com, and someone will get back to you in 1 business day, and they'll either direct you to the best resource that's close to you, or we'll manage it ourselves to make sure that you have the opportunity to get it fitted properly. And then the helmet gets, the measurement. We teach the parents or the coach how to do that. Let's see. As far as samples, it depends on where you live. The dealers all have samples, so you have access to those that you can try it out. There's customizable pads. Some of the helmets right now cost upwards of $1,700, where they scan the head, and there's 7 customizable panels inside the helmet. Every one of our helmets has between 15 and 20 pads on the inside that can be customized to fit the exact head shape. So I'd like to always tell people, when you get the sample, when you first put it on, there needs to be that fine tuning. And that's just normal with any helmet. some of the other helmets that come as like a one size fits all, they just put a bunch of comfort foam on the inside of it. So it fits fine, but you're losing protective foam because that more dense foam, you know, was cut down. So they don't get returns. Nobody sends the helmet back. With ours, you get a kit with every helmet that allows you to customize it to the young player's head. The helmet's very innovative in terms of structure for improving energy absorption. Was wondering if the latest Apache helmets 3D printed pods have ever been tested for fatigue life since their design is so unique. Yes, they have. There's a company that we partner with that entered the NFL's Head Health Tech Challenge. The company's called Collide. They're in Canada. It's Kollide. They did repeat impact testing. We do repeat impact testing internally. And that's one of the reasons that these reconditioning events are important. So you have a helmet example. There's a Cathedral Catholic High School here in San Diego. Every year they send their helmet in. They're willing to pay that little bit extra to have it checked. When we're going through the helmet, we check all the internals, for wear, tear, if there's any type of failure, and that's replaced. Big into youth football because of my 9-year-old son. My question is, I think we already answered that one. Oh, here's the last one. My daughter plays 7-man football, and your SS1 is rated #1 at Virginia Tech. One of the league officials was concerned that it could cause harm to other players. So that's a great one. The SS1 is a foam headgear. It's made of the same internal as the LS2 and the same internal that's in the Apache Lightning. It's a foam. We actually tested it at Virginia Tech. It got a #1 rating, the only headgear to ever get a perfect score. But we also tested it against an unhelmeted head form at Virginia Tech. So we took the head form that duplicates another player on the field that's not wearing any headgear, and we dropped a head form with our headgear on it. And the performance was so good, it was better than if player A had been wearing a competitive headgear. So the barrier between the two players, what's protective. And that's what the SS1 does for both players, whether they have a headgear on or not. So we take a lot of pride in that being a #1 headgear. That SS1 is also a soccer headgear. And for the young players that don't head the ball anymore, because the rules have changed to avoid injury, that's also a #1 headgear. I won't take up anyone else's time. We've been on for about an hour and 15 minutes. You've been patient. Thanks so much. I know that Peter and Michael may have already jumped. The reason we do these, and maybe I wish our competitors would do them as well, so people would have a wealth of information, is because you guys are the ambassadors of the sport. And you'll be our ambassador if you become a customer of ours and we earn your business. The parents that take the time to go and do this, we know you care about your kids. Other than I will say that even competing with NFL equipment managers, the most informed people are parents that take the time to go and shop for a third-party helmet that they're not given out of the shipping container at high school's, first equipment day. They search, they look, they do watch reviews, they look at studies, they look at the different ratings, and they take an hour and 15 minutes to jump on and listen to 2 or 3 people talk about head health tech and safety and just general safety with your sons or daughters. My son wore this helmet. I think that's the biggest endorsement. Peter's a forensic neurologist. His son wore this helmet and take great pride in that. We hope that there you go. Brad, thanks for holding that one up. When your athlete at the end of the season comes off and says, didn't have a headache, my neck didn't hurt, and hopefully get through the season without getting a ding. That's our goal. That's our job. We're never going to be perfect. Football's a tough sport. We can't protect against every injury, but we do our best. Our goal is to be perfect. And as long as we're striving for that, we think that we bring the best product out on field. I want to thank everybody for attending today. Please reach out with any additional questions. And if you have any suggestions on what we can do differently in the webinar, if there's anything related to our products, etc., and if anybody's really in a pinch and they need some help on pricing, we'll do what we can to be accommodating. We appreciate everybody. We've lived in, walked in your shoes. We've all coached and we've all had kids that have played, and that's why we're here doing this. And hopefully today was helpful and you took something away from it. Thank you.
Thank you.